Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech with your host Elias. This episode's infotainment, if you want to call it that, because you're gonna be entertained. We need a re-education. And even though this is gonna be a little more Canadian based, but I believe a lot of this could apply to America as well. And I still think there is great misconceptions of Islam and Muslim in general that I think the West just doesn't understand. And I have an expert here who's going to help out with that. Okay. Because just like the Christian denominations and various Jewish groups, there's different groups of Muslims as well. And not all of them agree on everything. Surprise? You shouldn't be. Any big group, any big faith-based group will have this. Okay? It's big. You're gonna have many opinions. You have people worshiping Allah this one way or the other way, or some will tolerate Western stuff and some will not. Okay, but we're gonna go through, I would say, some of the misconceptions I think the West needs to understand. If he's an expert, and I'm gonna say this, I'm happy that he clarified with me because I kind of assumed he had at least some Islam or Muslim descent or background. He doesn't. He just look at things as very, very objectively. And I think we need to do more of that. So just say, oh, I like this kind of Muslim, or I don't like this kind of Muslim. Or, you can have your preference. That's fine. But at least listen to a fair point of view before you make that decision, instead of listening to the biased media, especially American mainstream media. They only want Muslims when it's convenient. I'm calling you out mainstream media for that. So, enough of my monologue. I'm going to introduce the guest here. His name is, and I might butcher it, and I tell the guest before recording, feel free to correct me, destroy my ego. You kill my ego, please. So I have a guest here. His name is Eric Brazau.
Perfect.
So the first question is, what do you want the audience and the listeners to know about you?
Well, what do I want them to know about life in general or about the subject matter?
A little bit of both.
Okay, so I'll try to stick more with the subject matter. What I try to, like, my premise is Islam is what the vast majority believe it to be. And they believe it to be what it is that what is called the Salaf or the Salafiyah or the Sunni Islam is the predominantly 95 to 98% to at a minimum 85% of the Muslim community is what's called Sunni Islam. Now, many people will say, we do not like the extremists. We don't feel comfortable with the fundamentalists. Or there are some Muslims who identify as what's called reformer Muslims who say, my Islam is compatible with the American Constitution. What I have learned, and what I write about very clearly in one of the chapters of my book, is if you were in an elevator and you met a man who was a Buddhist, he had a sign on his forehead that said, I'm a Buddhist. But he was not very nice that day. He was very angry. He was disappointed. Maybe his dog just died. He just went bankrupt. You could say, well, I deduce from this Buddhist man that Buddhism is a bad religion because I met a Buddhist who was not very nice. Consequently, if you meet some quote-unquote nice Muslims or quote-unquote bad Muslims, you could deduce Islam is this because I met some nice Muslims or I met some bad Muslims, and obviously that does not make any sense. Similarly, you could meet a nice grandmother who bakes cookies but was a member of the Nazi party, or she was the secretary of Hitler. But she's a nice, polite lady, and she makes cookies and brings them to the little children in the kindergarten. Now, the fact that do we judge her by the fact? So if we said, I know a nice 85-year-old lady who bakes cookies, therefore, and she was a Nazi member, therefore, I can conclude that the Nazi party is nice because she's a nice person. You cannot do that, correct?
Oh, no, absolutely not. A person with a functioning brain will just say that's crazy.
Well, no, but no, when you say a functioning brain is crazy, absolutely not. Because in life, most people do not critically analyze their thoughts, their thinking, their opinions. Most people have opinions that they've formed over the last 5, 6, 10 years or 3 months, and they're not sure why they think what they think. They just think what they think because that's what they think. So how many people do you know actually come home at the end of the day and analyze all of their thoughts?
Oh, it's likely not. No.
No, you don't have time. You're working, you're going, you're filling the gas, you got the kids, you're doing, no, who can sit for an hour and meditate on their thinking thought process? They don't. And then again, most people prefer to believe what it is that their tribe believes. So if you and all of your friends are, I don't know, leftists, it might be difficult for you to have a conversation or to have thoughts that are not in the leftist ideology, because that would be thinking outside of your tribe. And vice versa. People want to belong. So what part of your opinions and thoughts are from you legitimately, and how much of them are from external factors?
I mean, we are molded since we were babies to believe this, do that, right? Just to fit in, right? To please the family, and then move on to the friends and the social groups, like you said. No, I absolutely agree with that. We are social beings, so we want to fit in. So we're gonna mold our opinion just to fit in with the group. We are social beings, so
correct. So sometimes you can be belonging to a social group, and perchance it just turns out that some of those opinions maybe are correct. However, it could be that they are correct opinions, but they're based on the wrong premise. So, just like in law, when a judge gives a decision, as important as the decision is how he came to the decision. He has to write that out. So similarly, most people who have an opinion on Islam do not know precisely why they have this opinion. And maybe you're not aware, or you didn't see that in the social media. In 2012, I went to jail for Islamophobia.
Yep, I just saw that while I'm researching. So, oh,
excuse me?
No, I just saw that on social media very recently while I was researching. So, oh,
right. So I was in Canada, a notorious Islamophobe. I was on the newspapers. It was a big story from coast to coast. And I won't get into details, but something happened. And in the summer of 2017, I reevaluated my stance. I went back to zero. And I swallowed, because I like to believe that I'm a very reasonable, intelligent, logically based person. If I don't know something, I will say to someone, listen, I don't know. I don't have an opinion. I won't argue on that point. So I said, perhaps I was making a mistake. So I threw away my Islamophobia. I made some public pronouncements on YouTube, on social media, denouncing my past indiscretions, my past behavior, my past ideology. And I started on a new path, a journey to discover the Islam in Canada and America based on the teachings of Muslim scholars, imams, and the texts available from here in North America. So I no longer paid attention to the imam in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Pakistan. I didn't listen to that Islam. I said, I'm going to confine myself to America and Canada. And I now can say with some confidence that I am a preeminent expert, not on the religion of Islam per se, but on what they say Islam is. When I say they, meaning the scholars and the imams, the senior ones, the senior organizations, Canadian Council of Imams, National Council of Canadian Muslims, plethora of imams from coast to coast, including in America. And I've also studied what it is that what we would call the modern progressive Muslims, what do they say Islam is? Now, so you have the two camps, two voices in essence. But important to ascertain is how big is each camp? Just like an army affects the outcome, an army creates what we would call critical mass. So if one camp represents 1% or 2% of the ummah, the community, and the other's voice represents 90 or 95% of the voice, the ummah, you can then therefore conclude the 95% more closely resembles the Islam of the community. Do you follow so far?
Yeah. No. So far, in other words, the people who say this are the majority, right? They're the ones that have the say, and they shape the perception of all that. So, okay.
They shape the community.
They shape the community, the beliefs, and even some reformations. And
they're the ones who are speaking in the mosques. So every Friday, when the Muslims go to the mosque, which Islam are they listening to? Which Islam is being preached? Is it the LGBTQ friendly Islam? Or is it the Islam that says, in essence, homosexuals must be killed? And those two voices are very much alive in the mosques in Canada, in America. So that's what my book explored. That was my first book. My second book is to understand how Islamophobia is shaping the narrative of Islam's contribution here in Canada.
Okay, so I'm curious about the first book, because there is a strong misconception, right, that many Muslims are homophobic. You know,
well, you see, then if I may come back, Elias.
Yes.
I no longer discuss Muslims. And that's a very important part. Just the same way like in the elevator, I do not care what an individual Buddhist thinks about Buddhism. I don't care what a communist thinks about communism. Is he a good communist, a bad communist, a happy communist, a sad communist? I don't care. What does the Communist Manifesto? What does the Communist Party in Russia, the Duma, how does that communism practically affect the people? Similarly, I don't talk about Muslims. I talk about simply what do the imams teach Islam to be. Then we can assume that if Muslims will be influenced and affected by the imams and the leaders of their community. Fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, simple.
I think it's a perspective that I'm coming from, right? Is that these are the misconceptions that are pretty strong in the West, right? And all I'm looking for is just any clarity or debunking or anything.
Well, when we say misconceptions, it would be like, would you agree that in social media or even in all media, there is both misinformation and disinformation?
Oh, of course.
Okay, then the question is, if I told you 4 and 4 is 8, and somebody else could say, no, that's disinformation, and me and all of my 1,000 friends are going to say 4 and 4 is 9. So if you didn't know the answer to either of those, you would not know who is giving the disinformation and who's giving the true information. So my question to you is, how do you know who is giving the disinformation?
sometimes that's hard to trace. Like you gotta dig and dig and
Well,
dig
okay,
and
so
dig.
the point is
Mhm.
I and several others, but not that many others, am in a position to tell you what is it that 95% of the Muslim imams in North America and in Europe are preaching. And what is it that 5% are preaching? Because I've studied that for the last 10 years. And some people don't like to hear what it is, the truth and the realities, right? So, for example, if I were to say ISIS, Al Qaeda, here in Canada, there's an imam called Shabir Ali. Very nice imam, senior imam, with the degrees from University of Toronto, speaks Arabic. He said on his show called Let the Quran Speak that ISIS justifies their actions with verses in the Quran, with the doctrine in the Hadith, and jurisprudence over the last 1400 years. They use that to justify their actions. That's what the Imam said. Therefore, it would be difficult to say ISIS are not Muslims because they use the doctrine of Islam to justify their actions. So somebody could say, you or me, we could say, well, we don't like the actions of ISIS, but could we say they're not Muslims? I'm not sure about that. If imams will tell you that, well, yeah, ISIS and Al Qaeda, they're Muslims. So another imam called Yunus Cathadra in Vancouver, Karim Abu Zaid in Colorado, have said very clearly that the Taliban, because just recently there were some stories about the Taliban mandated women to wear the burqa to stay in their house and not have it. You know about that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. They were saying, why does anyone in the world have a problem with that? That's their business. They are now the governing authority in Afghanistan because they are the government. Therefore, it is within their rights to implement the Sharia. And all Muslims should love for the Sharia to be implemented. So what the imams here in Canada were saying is that Muslims must, quote unquote, act within the law. And right now, the law in Afghanistan is such, and that's the law, and that's wonderful. Some people will say that what's happening to the women in Afghanistan is horrible. Some will say that. And they'll say that that's oppression. Some others, doctors of Islam and imams, will say, well, that's liberation because Islam frees women and allows them to not be seen as objects. And that, aside from that, the burqa and the full face covering is mandated by Allah. Now, is it not? It's not for me to say. But that's what the Imam says. Okay, so is that the true Islam? Is that the false Islam? Well, that's the Islam that they want to live. And if we're going to say religion is an internal spiritual communication with God, correct?
Right.
And then we say, or it is said, all religions are equal and all cultures are equal, and we must respect all cultures, correct?
Yep.
Well, then we should respect the Taliban. We should
Yep.
respect ISIS based on that doctrine.
That's a tough one, and you got me thinking this very differently. Now I'm beginning to understand what the Western misconceptions is. Well, why they saying why this is, you already said, woman wearing a burqa is law, right? Because the Taliban runs the government, so that's official law. There's no argument there. The reason why I know the West will say that is because, we used to, women dressing whatever they want, essentially. So we just projecting our belief into, to these events, even though they're the government. they're the government, and if look, some people's not gonna like it because we can see it around the world. We got social media and mainstream media covering these things, and yeah, I mean that's the law.
So,
I hate to say, I don't want to say like move out because some of them cannot afford to move out. They don't like it, but yeah, that's a tough one. You got me thinking.
well, so that brings us back to when it's some misunderstanding Muslim, whether it be in Germany, Sweden, North America, San Bernardino, California, goes on a shooting spree or blows up a bus, right? Not all Muslims, not all imams denounce that action. Some will, but many actually don't. So you might remember the teacher that was beheaded in France.
No, I don't remember that one, but I do remember the San Bernardino shooting.
Okay. In France, teacher was beheaded after school in broad daylight because apparently he showed the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to his class. The point of the story is this. It was a huge backlash in France. And the imams, many imams, you would find actually on my website, there's a place called France Crisis. I spent countless hours downloading and putting up videos of the interviews of the imams themselves, who said very clearly, now is not the time to do such actions because these types of actions will bring more difficulty to the Muslim ummah. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And am I talking, I went through 15, 20, 30 imams. None of them actually said that cutting off the man's head was wrong. They said now's not the time to do it. And many, and actually have also said, we cannot do such actions when we are in a minority because it's silly. You have to wait. So is that the good Islam or the bad Islam? It's not for me to say, but that is the attitude of all of the Imam scholars. And one of the persons who said exactly this is Yasser Qadi, and the other one was Omar Suleiman. Omar Suleiman is the founder of what's called the Yaqeen Institute in America. Gets government funding. He actually was invited by Nancy Pelosi to give the prayer at the opening of some assembly or something a few years ago. He wears a suit with a nice tie. To see him, if you looked at him, you would want your daughter to marry this guy. He's 6'4". He's got a nice, not a long beard, nicely, manicured, all of that. He looks very civilized. And he comes across as very civilized. Yet, he was upset that France and Paris was supporting the teacher who was beheaded and saying that it was wrong and was cracking down on the mosques. Because after the beheading, France went crazy. I mean, they really were afraid. They were freaking out. They were afraid. Because you can imagine a teacher beheaded in the middle of the day as he's walking out of school. And the reaction of the Muslim scholars was, this is just one teacher beheaded. No big deal. Why are France overreacting like this? So those subtleties are something that I look into. It's my job. It's what I do. You could say I'm obsessed. Perhaps I am. The same way a heart surgeon knows everything about hearts. A doctor of the brain knows everything about the brain. It's what he does. This is what I do. So a Muslim has a religious duty in the Quran, in the Hadith, in his community. It's to do what he can to make sure that Islam is the dominant religion and that Sharia law takes over the nation. That's a religious duty. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on who you ask. Here in Toronto, I forget his name, it'll just come to my head, spoke very clearly to a lecture. He said, and I'm quoting now, we Muslims do not want to take over for the sake of taking over, but we want to take over to make things better. We don't want to take over to enslave the people, but to help them to get to paradise. So to make things better, we will have to take over from one perspective. But we're taking over for the betterment of Canada. So that in itself, some people, it would rub them the wrong way. But then others will say, well, we are Muslims, and as Muslims, it is our religious duty to take over and make every place that we go to, at some point, whether it's in 50 years, 100 years, Sharia. Because this is the law of Allah. Is that good? Is that bad? It's not for me to say. But it's what it is. Example, I once was at a party, and I'm talking to some girl, and I explained to her that crocodiles and alligators don't have jaws to chew. You know, alligators don't chew their food. Did you know that?
No.
Okay, so an alligator will grab you, and another alligator will come, and they'll do a death roll, which means they'll pull you apart. Like they'll just twist in the water, and they'll rip you apart into pieces. And then they'll swallow chunks. So the girl, who I thought was kind of loony, she said, that's disgusting. I said, well, it's crocodiles. And she said, I don't like crocodiles. They're bad animals. I said, well, they're crocodiles. They're not doing that because they're mean, because that's how they eat. You cannot blame a crocodile for being a crocodile, correct?
Right. I mean, whether you like it or not, that's their nature. That's
a crocodile.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Islam, we have to talk about the religion of Islam and not some Muslim people. Because then again, when you might see a Buddhist, like back to Buddhists, you might see him on a good day or a bad day. I mean, it depends on the day you see him, right? And then again, what is it that this Buddhist man wants you to see? Is he telling you the whole truth or part of the truth? For example, I'm sure there are people who don't know the real you. They only see what you want them to see. Not everybody knows you, correct?
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want people to know me. That's why I'm doing this podcast. But little by little, that comes out.
Okay.
But people choose. If people want to know something, they will know it. And people want to hear what they want to hear. Just like that loony girl. Loony girl didn't like the crocodiles just because of their nature, right? I don't want it.
Right.
I don't want it. If they don't like me, they're gonna find reasons not to like me. So I'm using that similar analogy.
So Islam is, or could be, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram. The imam with the big long red beard who says, we have to take over America, free Palestine from the river to the sea, wipe out Israel. Could be Islam. Muslim Student Association, Muslim Brotherhood, in all the universities. That is 95% of Islam. Or that's 95% of the Muslims. So Zuhdi Jasser, who is a Navy surgeon, lieutenant, he wrote a book. He's very famous in the modern liberal Islam. He specifically has said, and he features in my book because he's the reformer. Remember, Muslim reformers, fundamentalists. He says, my Islam is compatible with the American Constitution. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, you said his Islam is compatible with the U.S. Constitution.
What's the key word there?
His Islam.
Exactly. His Islam.
Right. His Islam.
Okay.
Not the Islam, not, anything like that.
His Islam, right. Irshad Manshi, who is an associate professor in California, etc. Now she came from Toronto. She identifies as a lesbian Muslim. And when she goes to places to speak about Islam, the police cancel her engagement because they can't offer her protection, because they're going to, the hotel, everything is stormed by, like she was in Malaysia. She had to leave the country. Nobody was going to stand for her to speak on a stage. So when she goes to lecture halls in California or wherever, people love her. She's funny. She's kind of cute. She gives lectures into nice theater halls, 400, 500 people. Unfortunately, not a one of them is a Muslim. And she sells books. It was bestseller, but no Muslims don't buy her books because no one can care less what she has to say. So, of course, if you ask me, or I ask you, you probably don't like the Islam that, throws gays off of rooftops, correct?
Yeah, even in general, not even just them. I mean, in general.
No, I'm making a joke,
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
But you don't like that Islam?
Oh, no, of course not.
Okay. Sure. But that does not stop that Islam from kind of being the vast majority of the true Islam.
Right.
So you will tell me, when I say you, I mean the general you, well, I work with some Muslims and I go to school with some nice Muslims and they wear, I'm a university student and I know a lot of Muslims and I never saw them do anything like that. Well, of course not. But how many people in North America would sit down and have a deep conversation about the true beliefs of the Sunnah, the Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad, what he did in 707, the Crusades. So we can go on and on about many aspects of the clash between Islam and Christianity. So let me ask you this question. Do you know what's called the Gates of Vienna?
The Gates of Vienna, like Austria, Vienna?
Yes, correct. Austria, Vienna.
No.
Okay, so at some point, I can't remember the exact date right now, Islam was going to invade Europe because Islam conquered a lot of land. They were conquering a lot of land with a lot of force. The Christian civilization made a stand with the Poles, the Austrians, Hungarians, and stopped them at Vienna. That's why it's called the Gates of Vienna. There's a website called the Gates of Vienna. So that battle, it's a major point in the history of Western civilization, could be seen in two ways. One way is the Christians stopped Islam from taking over Europe and destroying Western civilization. The other way could be the Muslims were not able to bring the light and the blessings of Allah and Islam and Sharia law to free the people in Europe from Christianity. You see what I just asked you?
Yeah.
So, was it a good thing that the Muslims were stopped at Vienna, or was it a bad thing that the Muslims were stopped at Vienna? If you ask the Muslims, or a Muslim, they would say that was a bad thing. Scholars and imams will tell you very clearly that the covering of the face, the niqab, there is dispute about whether it is mandatory or obligatory or preferable. Meaning some scholars say you have to wear it, you must. And other scholars will say it's preferable, but not mandatory. And still other scholars will say, and I'm talking about doctrine now, only one eye needs to be exposed. You probably didn't know that.
No, but I didn't know there was.
Pardon?
No, I didn't. I know there was mandatory for some scholars. I mean, I dabbled into this a little bit, and of course, there's some that prefer to do it. Well, that's why I have you here, because you're helping me enrich my understanding of
Right.
at least.
So let me ask you:
uh,
is that extremism? The Islam and the imams who say women must cover their face, or say it's preferable that she covers her face. Some would say in the West that to encourage women to erase her identity is very weird. It's a weird thing in civilization to have people walking around with face masks. Okay.
Yep.
It's maybe not preferable. I mean, I personally myself, if you ask me personally, I would not want to live in a civilization where all the women's faces are covered.
I would agree.
Okay.
I easily agree with that.
Okay. So then let me ask you this question. If a father, very nice guy, goes to work, pays taxes, is a Muslim man, goes to the mosque, does all the nice things, tells his daughter, because they raise her since she's a child, so they can, mold her, of course, to some extent, to a large extent, that at the age of 8 years old or 9 years old, she now starts to become a real woman, and she must cover her face and her hair because she is now a sexual object. Some people would say that that's very weird. But in Islam, in Iran right now, and a few other places, but I know in Iran, they're thinking to lower the marrying age to 9 years old. And many Muslim communities follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Prophet Muhammad married a wife, Aisha, when she was 9 lunar years old. Now, the reason I use the word lunar is because a lunar year does not correspond to a solar year. So 9 lunar years old is actually 8.5 years old with the sun. So Hadith will tell you that the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 or 7. But she came to live with the Prophet when she became 9. Now, is that extreme? Is that weird? It depends who you ask. But within the Muslim communities, it is understood that if a man were to marry a 9-year-old girl and do what a man does with a girl when she's in his bed, that would be okay because it's been done. Now, will the police give you problems? Will society, that's another issue. Here, Canada, but the Canadian police Muslim chaplain for the Toronto police is on record saying very clearly in a video upload that to do that practice today, you could get in trouble because our society is so perverted that they would not be able to accept that you can do this with a 9-year-old girl. That was the police Muslim chaplain, Mushla Khan. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Not for me to say, but that is the reality of what Islam is. Now, there are others who will say, no, that's not right. That's not good. We can't do that. Okay. But there's others who will say, yes, we can, because that's the teachings of Islam. So, again, who is an extremist? An extremist is a label that some people want to put upon other Muslims. But is it fair? I mean, if someone is living his religion the way he thinks his religion should be lived, who can tell him he's wrong? Are we allowed to tell them he's wrong?
I mean, you said a lot of interesting points. And I gotta say, I think when we label what's right, what's wrong, what's extremist, what's okay, it's based on how we was brought up and raised, right? Because we
Correct.
put our personal
Yes.
preference and opinion
Or biases.
or bias, right, into into labeling, and yeah, me, I could think some of it is weird and wrong, but but I appreciate you, just bringing what they do, because I think we need to get a clear understanding on what they do, what's their thinking, the thinking, especially from not just regular people, because like I use the Buddhist example, we label that whole religion just based on that one bad attitude,
Right.
which is unfair to begin with, as opposed to the nice Nazi grandmother, you like her because of the cookies, which is insane because she actually supported,
Yeah.
a bunch of people getting killed, even though she's acting nice. And I like that thinking because that's why I don't go by attitudes. If a person has a bad attitude, I don't think that I go beyond that, because personally, if a person have a bad attitude, because something bad happened. It's just
Right.
that bad thing, but we absorb the emotions too much. I think we get too emotional when it comes to these things. So I appreciate the objectivity you bring to this discussion. And it's challenging me personally, which I actually like. So it's good. I came in here with some of my Western thinking, but I at the same time trying to understand what are my biases, what are my blind spots. I mean, I'm still gonna have my opinions and all that. At least I'll come out with a clearer understanding.
But let me ask you this question.
Sure.
Is it, at some point, is it legitimate, after research and some knowledge, for you to say that the the, the desert, or the Wakaminga tribe in Haiti, I'm making that up, of course, who threw the 12 years old virgin into the mountain to appease the volcano god, is a very backwards, dumb culture? I'm asking you.
Yeah, I will still say that, but at the same time, I'll understand why they did it, because they got to
Sure.
keep their.
So now the question is, do you say that that culture is equal to your culture?
If I'm going to be honest, no.
Okay. Very good. Of course. Please be honest. I'm being
Yeah.
honest. So then the point becomes, at some point, is it fair, as a man, you have to stand somewhere. You can't just, you have to make a judgment at some point, correct?
Correct.
So I have this question that I've asked some people. And I said, if you're standing on a bridge and under the bridge is a big flood, people are being washed away, they're going to die. You see your granddaughter or your daughter in the water. Beside your daughter is another girl, some girl, a nice girl. But the genie says you can only save one of those girls. Who do you save?
Oh,
I save my granddaughter.
yeah. I always say the relative.
Well,
Yes.
your daughter.
Yeah, the daughter. Yeah.
Many people will not answer that question. They say, well, it depends. I don't know who's closer. But can I say both? They don't want to say.
No, if I can only save one, it's like you said, I'm not afraid of some of these questions because I thought about these deeply. I said, well, if they only can save one, it's got to be,
My
even
daughter.
if it's just a son or whatever, I'm just going to pick the relative over the
Correct.
string.
So what that tells you, and psychologists have said the same thing, humans, on some level, are tribal. We can't get away from that. We do prefer our own relations more than non-relations. That's natural. So why would we expect? So another story, I went to an election here in my neighborhood, for the federal parliament, and a man called something Mushin was having a barbecue, like a political barbecue. You understand that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. At this barbecue, there was me, another person, and we were the only white people there. Everyone there, of the 400 or 500 people coming and going, were Bangladeshi. When I asked them, and I would talk to some very nice-looking people. All of them were wearing suits, ties, mostly. A few of them were wearing the hijab. Why are you voting for this candidate? Every single time, the response was, because he's a member of my community. When I would ask, and you remember, I'm very polite, we're holding barbecue, we're eating hot dogs, and I would ask, but how does that help Canada? That question, they did not like. That question was like fighting words. And their response was, it is time for the Bangladeshi community to get a piece of the pie. The Bangladeshi, he will promote the Bangladeshi community. Oh. So Bangladeshis don't vote for the candidate who's going to be best for Canada. They vote for the candidate that comes from their community. End of story. Now, if a white person were to say, I'm voting for this guy because he's a white candidate, that would raise a lot of eyebrows.
Oh, of course.
Okay. So there's all of these things that are playing. So we have Muslim candidates here in Mississauga and other places who get elected to parliament only because they're Muslim. Because then they push, quote unquote, the Muslim agenda, the Muslim caucus, the Muslim community. We have special programs here in Canada that allocate special funds to promote the Muslim community and Islam and Muslim cultural heritage. Okay. But then when you start to understand, well, what is Islamic cultural heritage? Well, separating men from women, because if you notice in every mosque, there's a separate entrance for the men and the women. Imagine I had a store, and I had a store, like a grocery store, and I had a special door for the men, a special door for the women. That would be shut down, correct?
Yeah.
Boom.
I mean, that's already, I'm going to use the American context. I got more comfortable with that. That's already gender discrimination right there.
Correct.
So that's a big problem already, legally.
So when something becomes a religion, all of a sudden it gets special treatment. Now, the problem with that is when we think of religion, supposed to be, we think of internal spiritual connection to God. Islam is first and foremost a way of life. It's how you deal with the law, interest rates, banking, foreign relations, everything. Judges, inheritance. So there is no concept of separation between spiritual and political. It doesn't exist. And the imams will tell you very clearly, and they argue against this, that Islam is a complete and total way of life. Every aspect of your life is Sharia law. How you walk into the bathroom, there's a dictate. You use your left foot to walk in, you use your right foot to walk out. In Islam, you don't drink with the left hand. That's shaitan. It goes on and on and on. So when you hear people say, well, we are against political Islam. You've heard that one?
I've heard that a couple of times.
Yeah.
I heard it, yeah.
We're not against Islam. We're not against Islam. We're against political Islam. Well, that's misinformation. It's either misinformation or disinformation. It would be like saying, I'm against wet water. Well, how could that be? Water is wet. It's water. What makes water water is its wetness. So what makes Islam Islam is the fact that it's a total system of life. Everything. So in Islam, legislation, all laws come from Allah. Nothing comes. So yes, as a man, you can, you can vote on who's going to be the ruler, but the ruler must rule by the legislation that comes, the law from Allah. And these are all the things that come out very clearly in the book. Now, is that good? Is that bad? Do you like it? Do you not like it? That's another issue. But it is that. And so far, this book is almost a year old. Nobody has discredited it. Nobody has tried to discredit.
I mean, how you going to discredit decades and years worth of study? I mean, that's very hard to do.
Well, the book, I say nothing.
Right.
All I say is what it is that they say.
Right.
So if you have a problem with the book, that means you have a problem with the imam. Argue with him, not me.
You're just a messenger.
I'm just a messenger. I'm on a journey to discover the true Islam. I'm learning. And what I learn, I put it into a book.
Sure.
And on my websites, on my YouTube channel, nonstop.
I say this was a pretty heavy, but I actually enjoyed this conversation. I'm definitely learning something out of it. And I'm going to address my listeners' and viewers for a second. I know this is long, some of it is difficult, but try to take yourself out of the equation, at least try to get an understanding what this conversation is about. Look, I know we like to be ourselves, we tribalistic, we go what we like. Push that aside. Try to push that aside because I want you to have an understanding. And especially have this expert here about what Islam or Muslim is. And then, you form your opinions, whether you like it or not. But let's be intelligent about it. Because I used to fall for that same thing, say, oh, yeah, I didn't like that political Islam. But remember, it's a way of life. That, and I love that analogy he put. Are you against wet water? All water is wet. That's nonsense. The only dry water is evaporated water. It's gone.
Correct.
Oh, it's all or nothing. Really.
Right.
So just make sure you have that understanding. You can form whatever opinion you want. Trust me, I don't agree with all of it. I'll tell you that much.
Well, when you say you don't agree, there's nothing for you to agree with. Because how could you? I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know, red is the best color for a fire truck. You can say, no, I don't agree with that. I think yellow would be better. Okay.
Right.
But again, you see, you feel the need, as the nice person that you are, to put something there where you don't agree with everything I said, but I haven't said anything other than what it is the imams say.
No,
so
I'm not saying
how
with
can you
you.
agree with that or
No, I'm
disagree
not
with
saying
that?
with you. I'm not saying with you personally, because you're just a messenger.
Okay.
So my argument is not actually with you, and unlike most people, I could make that distinction. It's just, I don't agree with, all.
Well, you might say you don't. So if I understand,
yeah,
you might be saying that you do not want some of this Islam to become entrenched in America.
No, because some of it, just like that reform person, I think that reform person is all naive, saying that, maybe that person's Islam is compatible with America, but that's not. But things you already said, that's the way of life. So they're living it, breathing it, talking it, everything. So it's all or nothing, and that getting. I'm not Islamophobic either. I do have some Muslim friends.
So let me share this with you. It just came to me.
Sure.
In the Quran and the Hadith specifically says the imam in Vancouver specifically said in English very clearly, hating the Yahud. Do you know what is Yahud?
I bet it's anyone that's not a Muslim.
The Jew.
The Jew. Oh, yeah.
Hating the Yahud
Yahoo.
is the religion of
Oh,
Islam.
oh,
Pardon?
I should pay attention to root. I said Yah.
Yahud.
Yahoo.
Yahud is the religion of Islam. If you do not hate the Yahud, then go to the church, go to the synagogue, but the masjid, the mosque, is not the place for you. Okay, in Montreal, there were 2 cases uploaded to YouTube where the imam was saying, oh, come and kill the Jew that's hiding behind me. We have to kill the Jew. Okay, that's hate speech. That's very not nice. He was saying that in the mosque. Oh, so what more do we need to understand that it's possible and maybe very likely that there's a reason why 150 years ago, Islam was on one side of the world and Christianity was on the other side of the world, and they did not mix. There's a reason for that. Now, you have Muslim congressmen. And a lot of people, slowly, things are changing. There's things you can say. Here in Canada especially, there's a lot of things that you cannot say because it would be a crime, which were not a crime 50 years ago. That's changing over, on a very rapid basis. So it's not about, is Western civilization better than Islamic civilization? That's not the conversation. The conversation is, which civilization do you prefer? Is socialism better than capitalism? I don't want to argue that. But I prefer capitalism. That's all.
And well, me and you are in agreement on that one. I prefer capitalism as well.
Right.
Right.
But you don't have to argue why you prefer capitalism. You can just say, I prefer capitalism. Do you like blonde hair or black hair? Women. I mean, whichever you prefer. It's your right to prefer what you prefer.
That'll be red hair, but hey.
Sure. Do you prefer Western civilization or do you prefer Asian, Chinese civilization? I'm sure Chinese civilization could be very good if people like Chinese civilization. You can go and visit China, be there for 2-3 weeks, visit the culture, and then come back home. But there's a reason why Chinese civilization is over there, Canadian or Western civilization is over here. Go visit Pakistan, 2-3 weeks, come back home. Go to Africa, visit, come back home. So do we want America and Europe and Canada to more reflect the culture of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kurdistan? Maybe we do. But then again, maybe we don't. And that's a conversation that we have never had in the public. Like if me and you were having this conversation in a coffee shop that we're having right now, it would make a lot of people very angry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But these tough conversations need to be had, and this is the problem. And this brings my biggest criticism of mainstream America and a lot of people. You don't want to have these conversations. This is why the problems in general continue to fester and get worse, because we don't want to deal with the tough, grown-up conversations. We want to deal with the easy stuff. We want to put the hard stuff aside.
Well, is there anything? I pretty much said mostly what I want to say or what I can say. At this point, I've been repeating myself. So is there anything that you want to ask me or clarify or?
No, you actually answered a lot.
Maybe more than you bargained for.
Yeah, you could say that. That's an accurate statement. More than what, yeah, I gotta say I was not prepared for this, but hey, I need to follow my model, learn how to have a tough conversation, even if I'm not fully ready or more than I bargain with. Because if it's what I bargain with, then it's not difficult, right? So,
Okay,
listeners and viewers, I hope you enjoyed this difficult conversation. If you survive through a lot of this audio onslaught, good for you. Now let's get to the shameless plug-in. You already talked about your book. Where can people get your book, your sites, all that? Well, his main site is Eric Brazau, and I'm going to spell that for you. That is EricBrazau.com. That's .com. Okay, and then he has an email as well. That's ericbrazau@gmail.com. He has a phone number as well. And like he has a book, he has a bunch of content regarding all of this. And look, this is a guy that's been arrested for perceived Islamophobia. So he's tough.
I was in jail for 3 years in a 5-year span.
Yeah. So
I paid a price.
He's been through tough life. He's been through trials and tribulations.
The book is available at Amazon. Muslim Reformers versus Fundamentalists. That's it. And then there's a website, the blog. So I'm not doing this to sell books, but at some point, it's possible that what we call Western civilization could slip away. Remember, there was a time when this place we call Turkey, the country Turkey?
Yeah.
Was the Byzantine Empire. Was a Christian land. Africa was Christian. Lebanon was Christian. Egypt was Christian. Many people don't even think about that, but Egypt was Christian. Syria was Christian. Jordan was Christian. So why is it necessary? Like, for example, you have a house, you have a credit card, you have a life, you have to keep things together, right? It's possible that if you don't keep it together, what happens? It falls apart.
Yep.
It's possible that if you don't keep it together, you become homeless. And you have okay, so if you're not diligent and take care of business, bad stuff will happen. So why is it? It's not a guarantee that our civilization must survive if we don't take care of business to make it survive. The same way you would not invite, homeless crackheads, or, to live in your house. You're not going to say, come over, crash in my house. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. That would be a problem.
Oh, I'm begging for a problem.
Right. So that's not a smart thing to do. Now imagine you have a wife and a daughter, and one day you come home with a crackhead to let him sleep. I mean, your first priority as a man is to take care of your family.
Yeah.
So what is the priority of our government? What is the priority of our civilization? Like, what's happening? That I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm not saying what's happening, but that's a conversation that we need to be having. I mean, if we just look at the southern border in America, is it 20 or 30 million illegal people?
Right.
So people are actually dying in America, being killed by people who shouldn't even be there. Wow. I can't imagine how I would feel if my daughter, something happened to her in a major way by an illegal immigrant. I would freak out. I don't know if I could handle it. Because the number one priority of a government is the safety of the citizens. So you've seen what's recently happening in Amsterdam, London, England, Germany.
Now I've dabbled into that. Things are looking pretty chaotic.
Yeah. So so we come back to, If you invite 5 and 6, homeless crackheads to crash in your apartment, once they're in your house, it might be difficult to get them out of your house. Okay. And on that note,
yeah,
cheerio, happiness, and smiles. Muslim reformers, fundamentalists.
after the homeless analogy, I think people's gonna come out spooked more than anything. Because oh my god, we're gonna think about the homeless, but no, I do get the intent. Is
Sure.
get our act together.
At some point, it's too late. At some point.
Right. And then, right, exactly. Now I'm just going to get to that. And if we don't, there's no turning back.
At some point.
Yeah, at some point.
And so what you need to start asking people, your friends, your group, is what point is the tipping point? Is it in 6 months? Is it in 5 years? Is it last year? Like at some point it's a time for what we call urgency.
Well, all I'm going to say is based on the recent election result so far, it's kind of reflect on that. I think some people already hit the tipping point. It's okay, enough is enough.
Right. So, but the question now becomes is what effort will be needed to reverse? Again, like the homeless analogy, it's real easy to bring 6 homeless crackheads into your house. You just come on, they just walk in. It's easy. But once they're there, it's not so easy to get them out.
Right. And then of course, if it gets worse, well, we're gonna have to abandon that apartment, go somewhere else. That's if you have enough money and resources.
Exactly. You created a problem that creates more problems. It's exponential. Because it takes, how many hundreds of years did it take to build America?
Well, it took a long time.
A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of blood, a lot of sweat. The Revolutionary War, the British, a lot of blood and sweat and money and resources to build America, to build Canada, to build Western civilization. And now it's all could be just being thrown away. Because people don't care. As long as they have their high-speed internet, with their whatever Twitter, their social media, as long as they have their baseball and their football access, right? Their streaming platforms so they can watch all the movies, they're fine. But there is one group of people among us who is on the offensive. And they don't live for this world. They make a point to say, our true life begins in the next world. So we sacrifice this world for the next. And they have a plan. And as they say, a man with a plan has a better chance of succeeding than those who don't even have a plan. So as a group, the Muslim community has a plan. Very clearly laid out. They know where they're going. They're dedicated to their mission.
Yep. So, Western civilization, we got to get our priorities straight. It's nice to got all this internet stuff, all this entertainment, but that could be easily gone if we don't get our basics, our ABCs, our life together.
Well, we can start by just accepting certain realities.
Right.
So this conversation that me and you have just had might be your first foray into this reality. Now, you can understand why not a lot of people want to have this conversation with me.
Oh, I totally understand.
It's not very popular.
It's not popular, but I don't mind having it because it is needed. I go by the big picture. The more objectivity. It is needed. And I've said this multiple times on my podcast. This is not the first time. Tough conversations are needed. Do I like to have the lighthearted, entertaining conversation? Yes, that'll be other episodes. There's some that like to tackle the hard stuff, even if it's not popular. Okay?
I'm looking forward to receiving the link, and it's been a pleasure to have had this conversation with you.
Likewise, even though I was uncomfortable at times, but I'm happy I had this conversation because it's a need, and it's good because I'm actually tackling hard conversations. So discomfort is actually weirdly a good thing.
Been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for your insights.
This actually is a bit. I'm exhausted a little bit. So I'm tired
Yeah.
from this. It's like I had a workout.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. We're gonna get rest real soon. So, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, family, or anyone daring to listen to this. Okay. So
Cheerio.
for wherever you listen to this podcast, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.